The objective the objective of this lab is to create an EC2, an elastic cloud compute, which is going to be a virtual machine. I'm also going to specify, I'm going to show you um, where we're going to be creating it. So right now I'm logged in into the AWS Management Console using my own account. So the first thing that we need to decide whenever we're creating resources in AWS has to do with the region. In this case, we can see that I'm in region US-East 1. I'm going to leave it the way it is. This is the closest one, I believe, to my location. So I'm going to leave that region as it is. The service that I'm going to be using is going to be the Elastic Cloud Compute, which in short is EC2. I can either look for it here in the compute section. You can see it here, or if I know the name of the service, I can just type it in. So I can type in EC2, and then because I'm going to be accessing this service a lot, I can put a favorite right next to it. That way I will have a shortcut somewhere here. That way whenever I need to go back to that to create a resource of the same type, I will be, or to the dashboard of EC2, I will be able to just click on the shortcut. Okay, so by doing that, so let me cancel it up here for now. You can see now that the shortcut is here. I can click on the shortcut, and I'm going to be provisioning an EC2 instance. Okay, so at this moment I don't have any EC2 instances in this location. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on instances, and I'm going to launch an EC2 instance. It's going to be a brand new. By the way, this is filtering only running EC2 instances. If I had an EC2 instance that were in a stop state, I wouldn't be able to see it. I'm going to remove this filter. But anyway, since this is the first time that I'm logging into this account, there's nothing here. So the main idea here, like I said, is that I'm going to be launching an EC2 instance. So I'm going to go through the steps to create an EC2 instance. Remember, the main thing that we need to be to think about when it comes to creating an EC2 instance is going to be, besides the region where it's going to be located, is going to be the Amazon machine image, which is related to the operating system that we want on that EC2 instance. We also need to think about the number of virtual virtual CPUs on that machine, as well as the amount of RAM. Remember that the number of virtual CPUs together with the amount of RAM is what we refer to as the instance type. Something that I'm also going to need is I'm going to have to specify also what is going to be the size of the hard drive that's going to be attached. In this particular case, it's going to be a solid state drive, so it's going to be an SSD. The type of SSD that I'm going to be using is going to be a general purpose 2, but we're going to see that. By the way, when it comes to AWS, when it comes to whenever you attach a hard drive to an EC2 instance, the we refer to those disks as elastic volumes. Okay, so the elastic volume service is the service that has to do with the hard drives that we can attach to an EC2. Okay, so let's start the process. Launch instance. Again, the first thing I need to do is I need to give it a name. In this case, just in the event that I wanted this to be a web server, in order to test whether I can connect to it, I can also call it web server. It doesn't matter what you call it. I can call it my first web server. Okay. So this is just a tag, like I said. That's the main idea about this, just a tag. The next thing I need to do is the AMI. This is related to the operating system that is going to be installed on this machine. In this particular case, I'm going to choose an Amazon Linux 2. So I select this. In this case, I'm going to also select the free tier eligible because I'm still part of the free tier eligible, which means if I create an EC2 instance of this type, I won't have to pay anything to Amazon as long as I am part of the, I still qualify for the free tier. Okay, so I select this one. This is going to be Amazon Linux 2. This is going to be the operating system, the distribution for it. The type of this can only be installed, by the way, on SSD type of drives or EBS, elastic volume service, part of the elastic volume service. I cannot install this on an HDD. This is a limitation that this AMI has. Okay. Next, we always leave this as is. With this case, we're going to the architecture of this system is going to be 64-bit system. Okay, and then next comes, as I mentioned before, the instance type. The instance type is related to the number of virtual CPUs, as well as the amount of RAM. In this case, it's going to be 1 GB of memory. And again, this is, I want to, because I don't want to pay anything, I'm going to select part of the free tier. If I were to look at some other options, you can see that there are some other options. For instance, if I go to some of the other ones here, you can see it's 84 cents for this one, C3.4X large. I would have to pay 84 cents per hour, which is pretty expensive. Okay, so in this case, we're going to be, and by the way, in this particular case, this lab only allows us certain types of systems. In this case, let me see. So you can see that there are some of these are grayed out, which means you're not allowed to use them. But the ones that we can use, we can see they are. You can see that this one is in a lighter gray. Anything that we can use is going to be like in a darker, font color. Okay, so I'm going to use the one that's part of the free tier. So in this case, I'm going to use a T2 micro. And the next thing I need to do is, as I mentioned in class before, or if I haven't mentioned it before, if you might not remember, we're going to generate a key pair because this is going to be kind of like the equivalent of the password. In this particular case, any EC2 instance that is an Amazon Linux 2, the username for that EC2 instance is going to be EC2-user, but the password, we don't use a password. Instead of a password, we're going to use a file to validate our credentials. Okay, so in this case, I don't have a key pair, so I'm going to generate a new one, and I need to give it a name. So in this case, I can call it because it's being I'm creating it in North Virginia. I'm going to call it N.Virginia, and then probably 2022-10, just in case I decide to create. You don't need to give an extension, by the way. And then in this case, I'm going to select. I'm going to leave these settings the way they are. I'm going to be creating the key pair type is going to be RSA. This is the encryption type that is going to be used to scramble the data that's going to be stored in that file. And then the format, if you're using Linux or if you're using Mac, you would be using the PEM. And most of the time, if you're working on a Windows system, you would be choosing the PPK file format for your private key. But if you use Windows, you need to use a program called PuTTY to be able to make your connection to this machine remotely. But in this case, I know that with Windows, you can use the PEM key and it works just fine. So I'm just going to download the PEM key. Okay, so create key pair. and now it's being downloaded to my downloads. As you can see, it's being downloaded there. The next thing I need to do is the network settings. In this particular case, I'm going to leave these as is. The reason that I'm going to be leaving it as is because I don't, whenever you create your first EC2 instance, Amazon provides a network for you. And in that network, in that virtual network that is created for you, you don't need to create the network first, and then instead of that, and then instead of that virtual network, you need to create something called a public subnet. You don't need to do all of those things. You can because AWS provides you with a default virtual private clouds, default VPC. So I'm going to be using that. The only thing that I'm going to make sure is that this is set to enable, which means I want this virtual machine to have a public IP address. Why do I need a public IP address? The reason is that if I want to initiate a connection from the outside, from the internet into this machine, if I don't have a public IP address, I won't be able to connect to it, okay? The next thing is the security group, which is equivalent to a firewall. And pretty much what I'm going to be doing here is with this I'm going to put restrictions in terms of the traffic that I want to allow into my EC2 instance. So what I'm going to be doing in this particular case is I want to be able to connect remotely to this machine. So the type of traffic that I'm going to allow is SSH. That is going to be traffic that is going to be encrypted, and I can come from any computer around the world. Pretty much, that's the main idea. Why we're saying that we accept traffic from anywhere around the world. That's, by the way, this is not a very good practice. If you're going to have remote access into a computer, it's not a good idea to use to allow traffic from anybody, because a potential hacker could try to connect to your computer. They won't have the private key, but if they were to get a hold of the private key, that would be a problem. Okay, but in this case, I'm going to leave it as is. Something that I mentioned is because this is the first server that I'm creating in this particular account, I want to allow traffic via HTTP into this machine coming from the internet, coming from outside of AWS. So in this case, I'm going to say allow the traffic, and so this is going to be also traffic that will be coming from anywhere from the internet. Create a new security group. That's that. And then the next thing, I need to select the hard drive. Yes, the hard drive that we're going to be using. This is going to be an SSD, which is a solid state drive. The capacity of it is going to be 8 gigabytes. And as I mentioned before, this is going to be of type general purpose 2. Anytime that you need to use a computer, anytime that you need to provision an EC2 instance that is going to be used for general purpose, you just use a general purpose. There are some other types, as you can see, but some of these are more specialized, like the one that's provisioned for IOPS. These are related to, are used with databases a lot of the time, okay? In this case, we also have magnetic hard drives, but if you remember the AMI that I used for this particular machine, the one that was related to Linux, had a restriction saying that I couldn't use an HDD. I cannot use a hard drive, a regular hard drive, the one with the spinning plates. I need to use an SSD. Okay, so I'm going to be using this type, and I'm not going to add any extra hard drives. I could have added an extra hard drive, but I'm not going to do that. Now, with respect to the security detail, the advanced details, This is the part where I'm going to have to create a script, where I'm going to have to enter a script, and this script is the one that's going to allow me to install install the web server. It's also going to start once the web server software is installed. I'm going to run to start that to run that server to get it started. And then another thing that I'm going to do is also I'm going to enable um, what's called the service for that server for the web server, so that every time that I reboot the machine, the that software will be running in the background. That's the main idea. Okay, so now I have the script. This is the script that I'm going to be typing in, that I'm going to copy and paste. Again, this is a Linux script, which is a series of commands that are going to be executed. Um, I can remove this as a comment. This is not necessary. But like I said, the main idea about this is, let me show you step by step. First of all, this is going to be a bash script. That's what it's called. It contains a series of commands. You can see the first command is this one is not a command, but the first this second line here, this is the first command. Pretty much what I'm going to do here is I'm going to update the operating system. In the next line, what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the this application HTTPD. This is called the Apache web server. That's the name that it's called. Apache web server is used a lot. Once I install it, I'm going to start that application. The same way that whenever you install an application in your computer, if you need to start using it, you need to start it, you need to run it. In this case, this is what I'm doing, but I'm doing it via a command. That's pretty much the difference. Then the next step that I'm going to do is using this other command, which is the systemctl, and I'm going to enable this in this case this is going to be called a service or a daemon, the HTTPD, and this is what's going to be running the Apache web server on this machine. Every time that I start this machine, this is going to run automatically in the background because I am issuing this command. So this will help make it remember to every time the machine is being rebooted, that the Apache web server is going to be running in the background. And the last line that I have here is simply a way in which I am creating a very simple web page. And in this case, this web page is simply going to contain a message that is going to say hello world from my newly launched virtual machine. In AWS, this is going to be an elastic cloud compute or an EC2. And all of that is going to be this message here that would normally be displayed on the screen is going to be written to a file. And the file is in this location. And then this is the file that whenever I connect to my web server, this is the file that my web server is going to be looking for. Okay, so now that I copy this, the next step I need to do is paste it here in the user data. Okay, and then the next step is to, and here I can launch multiple EC2 instances. In this case, I just want one. I don't need more. I could launch two just to see what happens. If they're going, let's try launching two, but you can launch just one. One is more than enough. But in this particular case, just let me show you what happens if you were to launch two. Of course, the more you launch, the problem is you're running out of the credit that you have, and that's the problem. But in this particular case, I just want to show you that I can launch two at the same time, and they're all going to have the same properties as my previous ones. So the definition that I created earlier is going to be used to create those two EC2 instances. But again, I advise that you create just one. In this case, I just want to show you something. Okay. So right now the this is being created automatically. It says that the two EC2 instances have been launched. What that means is that AWS is in the process of creating those two EC2 instances. At this point, I don't see anything here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my EC2 dashboard, and I'm going to click on the instances, and then I should be able to see. Okay, we can see it here already. Um, it's going to be, so you can, well, as you can see, I created two. The one should have been my, well, actually, I can modify this tag, for instance. If I click here, I can call this my second web server. So you can see that I have the ability to change this. This is my second web server. Again, I suggest that you only launch one. And then, as you can see, this is the ID that AWS is, how AWS is keeping track of this EC2 instance by this instance ID. Every EC2 instance that has been created in AWS is going to have a different instance ID. And then the state of this machine is running, which means in this particular case, this machine is being it's in the, it's as if you had pressed the on off button to turn it on. That's the main idea here. We can see here the instance type. Remember, in this case, this T2 micro instance type was one that had one virtual uh, processor as well as 1 GB of RAM. And then this is very important. This is the status check. Based on what appears here, we can see when these machines are available for us to start using them, start to try to connect to them. But in this case, right now, it's in the initialization process, which means I have to wait. What's going to happen here is at some point it's going to go into a pending state. Then after the pending state is going to go into, it's going to run two checks. And once those two checks are completed, then I will be able to try to connect to these, to either one of these EC2s. Okay. If you remember, the North Virginia region is, in this particular case, because I launched it in the North Virginia region, this region is known as US-East-1. But if you notice here, both of these two, they have an A at the end. What happens is inside of each region, there are at least two availability zones. And availability zones is what make up a region. The availability zones are independent. They're independent groups of data centers. So in the event that in a region one of those data centers goes down, you can have another one that that will be most likely be up and running. So the main idea is, like in this case, I should have selected that one of my web servers being one availability zone, which means one would have been in probably US East 1A, the other one would have been in US East 1B, for instance, but I didn't do that. So let's see, it's still in the initializing process. And something interesting here, remember that I mentioned that I wanted these machines to have public IP addresses? Well, these machines have public IP addresses. The first one has this IP address, and the second has this other IP address. And then let's see, we can see also here the key that I use. This is the name that I gave my key. It was North Virginia 2022 -10, just to remind me that it was created in 2022 in October. But you can call your keys whatever you want. Something important about keys is if you create a key pair, that key pair is only valid inside of one region. if I try to use that key, the same key pair in the US West 2, it wouldn't work there. It only works within this region. What that means is, and remember that a region is made up of at least two availability zones. These keys have a validity within that region. So any availability zone that is part of this region, the key has a validity there. Okay, let's take a look what the state of the initialization is. Sometimes you need to refresh. You need to refresh your EC, the state of your EC2 instances to see what's going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here to refresh, and as you can see, they didn't. Oh, they have already passed the two checks that the systems needed to pass. So what that means is I should be able to connect to the web servers that are hosted here. So what I can do is I can copy the IP address. Actually, in part of the details down here, I can copy the IP address from here. Instead of selecting from here and then right click copy, I can just copy the address from here. And then the next thing I can do is I can type. Okay, so let me go copy the IP address of the first server. So I'm going to copy this IP address. Actually, I can try to open the web page directly from here. So let's see what happens. So let's try to connect to it and see what happens. It's taking too long. I assume that there was a problem with. Let me actually, instead of that, let me copy. Oh, okay. The problem that we have here is, as you can notice, the protocol that I was my web server only supports a certain type of connections. This is, let me write it down in a quick note. The main idea here is the web server that I provisioned only accepts HTTP traffic. Okay, so it's going to accept only HTTP traffic. And then if I type 54.89.228.0, then if I try to use this one, it should connect me to the server. But as you can see here, there is an S, and that's for secure traffic. So in this case, if I were to use this one, the system that I use doesn't support HTTPS. Okay, so this is, in this case, this protocol is not supported. That's why I'm having a problem connecting to it. And whereas in this other case, this protocol, we know this protocol is supported by that server. So if I come here and I click on this, you see, and it's trying to connect, at some point it's going to give up. But if I click on this, it should take me, let me actually copy it from here, copy, and then paste it here, like so. Hello, you see, this is the web page. Hello world from my newly launched virtual machine, which in AWS is an elastic cloud compute, or EC2. That was the first server. That's the one that I have here. So I need to do the same for the. Remember, in this case, I didn't support this protocol. Unfortunately, that's why it didn't work. Now with the second server, let's take a look at the second server. So the second one is this one here. So what I need to do is I need to select it so the details of that server will appear down here. Okay, so I click here. Now I can see the details of that server. Let me try to make this a little smaller, move it out of the way. So if I click on this, once again, I'm going to select the IP address this way. And the one that I'm going to be connecting to is going to be this. This is for the second server. And then this is the second web server that I created. Okay. So in this case, I copy this. Remember, if you leave the HTTPS, if you click on this, it will assume. If you look down here, when I hover the mouse over the open, you see that it shows HTTPS, and that's going to be a problem because we are not the server that we created doesn't support HTTPS traffic. That's the problem. If I try to click here, you can see that the protocol that is trying to use to connect to it is HTTPS, and that's not what we want. So that's why I had to do it manually, which I did it here. I have the IP address here. So now I copy it, and then the next thing is I'm going to open another tab, and I'm going to paste it. And this is hello world from my newly launched virtual machine. And then this should be newly launched virtual machine web server. That's what it should have said, but that's fine. But that's pretty much the main idea about this. Now, the next thing that we want to do is, as I mentioned before, we want to create a remote connection to that server. So that's the next thing I need to do. Okay, so in this case, what I need to do is I need to use the command prompt. So this is the command prompt, and this is the location where I have the key for this, to being able to make the connection to to either one of these systems. I'm going to connect to each one at a time, but so the key name is going to be this. This is the key. Remember that I selected the PEM key. So what that means is I'm going to have to use the PEM key. So I select it, and then I'm going to copy it. Copy. Okay, so that's the name of the key. So this is the name of the key, and then it's going to be a PEM key. That's what I need to keep in mind here. Oh, well, I had the name down here, so it's going to be the PEM key. So pretty much what I need to do is I need to come back here to my terminal. By the way, this is the location where I'm saving, where my downloads are being saved. So that's why it says the K drive, but that's simply a location where my files are being saved. Now, if I need to connect to one of these machines, I need to use this format. I need to use the command SSH. Next, I need to use the identity file, which is going to be the key that I have here. But I'm just showing you right now what it should be. So in this case, it's going to be the private key. In this case, it's going to be, in the format is going to be PEM. In this case, the reason why I put this in this type of symbols, it means that you need to replace it by the key that you are using. And then after that, you have to type in EC2-user. So the same way, whenever you're logging into a computer, you need the username, and also you need the password. Remember that I said that we're not going to use passwords here, but instead of that, we're going to use the file, which is going to be the identity file. That's going to, together with the private key, is going to help us be able to log into that machine. And the last part that I need to indicate is I need to indicate the way to connect to that machine. And the IP address is going to be the way that I can do that. because it's a public IP address, which means it's accessible from anywhere out on the internet. 228, so it's 54.228.0. So if I do that, and well, actually, I should have typed in here IP address because I was trying to show you what the format is, like that. So that's going to be the format. It gives me a syntax error. In this case, it's going to be SSH minus I. Now I need to pass the identity file, North Virginia 2022 10.pem. The username is going to be for Linux 2 AMIs from AWS. They're going to be, the user is always going to be user EC2-user at, and then the IP address, the public IP address. In the first case, is going to be 54.89.228.0. And once you do that, it tells me the authenticity of this host cannot be established. So in other words, I'm trying to connect to a host, to a computer, and we're not. This is just trying to give us a warning. That server, we haven't validated that server, so usually you want to continue. I know that I created that server, so I know what I'm doing. So I'm going to say I want to continue connecting, and I am now remotely connected to that EC2 instance. As you can see here, by the way, this is an IP address that I'm getting here, and this is different, completely different from this one. That is because whenever you create an EC2 instance, that's going to have, for sure, is going to have a private IP address. This is going to be an IP address that will be used for this machine to be able to communicate with other machines that belong to the same VPC. Whereas the public IP address, this is optional. I could have selected not to use it, but if I had selected not to use it, I wouldn't have been able to connect to it from the internet, from outside of AWS. But this is the private IP address. Okay, and then one command that we have in Linux is list. It's kind of like the equivalent of directory in Windows. So if I do a listing, you see I don't have any files. But if I wanted to create a file, I can use this command called touch. This is going to create an empty file. And then in this case, I could call it my file, for instance, .txt. And if I do ls again, which does a directory listing, you can see that my file is there. By the way, if I wanted to add some data to my file, I could use, there's a text editor called Nano, and then I could use Nano together with my file.txt. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open this file using the Nano editor. Using the Nano editor, if I click here, you can see this is my first file. This is it. Okay. Now, if I want to, right now, this data is in RAM of this system. If I want to save it to the hard drive, I need to write out that data. And you can see here this little hat symbol here is it represents the control key. This well, this symbol is called the caret, by the way. But that means that I need to press control. So I'm going to press Control O, and it's telling me, do you want to write that file name? And then I'm just going to say yes. So it wrote 2 lines. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of here. Remember, this caret represents the control key in the Nano editor. So you can see here it's Nano. And then I'm just going to exit. So I'm going to click Control X, and then I am out of this. Oops, I wanted to do a listing. You can see here is my file. If I want to see the contents of a file in Linux, there is a command called cat, and that displays the contents of a text file. So if I type in my file.txt, we're going to see the contents of that file. You can see that it has, this is my first file, this is it, and then there I had blank, an empty line. That's why it said that I wrote 2 lines to it. But that's pretty much, I connected to the first one. If I want to connect to the second one, I can do it in another window, by the way. So give me a moment and I'll connect to the other one. Okay, so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a remote connection to the second server. I come here. So if you remember, the command is ssh dash, this is at the option of I for identity. The identity is the N Virginia 2022-10.pem. That is the equivalent of the password. Now I need the equivalent of the username, which is going to be this, and then the @symbol, and then the IP address of that other server. The other server is 3.86.151.166. And I click enter. Again, I know what I'm doing. I know that I'm connecting to a server that I'm familiar with, so I'm going to say yes. And you can see in this case it has a different IP address. In the previous case it has 132.31.83.232. In this other case we have 172.31.81.150. Okay, so this is important that they're going to have IP addresses that are going to be 172.31, and in this case 80 something. Again, in this case, if I want to do the same steps, if you remember, there was nothing in the directory where I was trying to get the listing from, so I'm going to do the same. In this case, I'm going to use, if you remember, in order to create an empty file, I can use the touch command. And here I just create, I can just call it text file.txt. That creates the empty file. Now if I do a listing, you can see here is the file. It doesn't contain anything. So if I were to do cat txt file.txt, there's nothing in it. But if I were to if I want to put some contents in it, I need to use the nano command, the nano editor, and then the name of the file, txt. So in this, hello, this is a new text file, byte, something like that. Remember, right now this is in RAM, I need to save it to disk. So I'm going to select the Control O the way I have here. So I hold down the Control key and then I press O, and then it's asking me whether to confirm whether that's the file I want to save to, and it says that it wrote 6 lines, I'm sorry. And now I can exit out of this, and for exiting I need to use this one, Control X, hold down Control key and then press the X key, and then I'm out of it. And then if you remember the command, like I did previously, I used the cat command, but at the time there was nothing in it. Now if I use the cat command with the same file, I should be able to see the contents of the file. And there it is. This is the contents of that file. And so pretty much that's the main idea about doing this. I was able to create 2 EC2 instances. It was very quick, the launching of them, and I connected to, because I installed web server software on them, and because I created, I don't not only installed the web server software, but I also started that web server so it would be up and running. Because of that, I was able to connect to the web servers in there. Okay, so something that I want to show you now is what happens if you reboot these machines. In this case, I'm filtering again the ones that are running. I know that I only have machines that are running, but here they are. Sorry if my screen is too small, but I'm going to reboot these two machines. The thing that I wanted you to pay attention to is what is going to happen to the IP addresses that these servers have. I'm going to remove this line from here because we know that we don't support HTTP. But pretty much these numbers here are the IP addresses of those servers, the public IP addresses. So uh, I'm going to change the instance state to stopping. I'm going to stop both of the systems. So I'm going to wait a moment while this happens. I should probably make the text a little bit smaller. Maybe I have more space to view things. I guess probably this is better. But the main idea here, what I'm trying to do now is I'm stopping these two systems. I'm going to it's going to take a few moments. This one is stopped. This seems to have stopped very quickly. This is now stopped. So you can see that both systems have been stopped. So the next thing that I'm going to do in a few moments is I want you to see what happens to the IP. And by the way, if I scroll down here, remember we used to have public IP address, the values here. Those values are gone. Those values are gone here. Let's see what happens if I reboot, if I restart these servers again. So, okay, I'm going to change the state of these systems, which I'm going to do is start those two systems. One of the first things, even before a machine is ready to up and running, it gets assigned the an IP address. And at some point, we're going to see that this is going to populate with information. Not yet. Okay, so this is in the pending state. Let's see. So it says that they were successfully started, but they're not ready yet. It says that they're running, but we need to make sure that they pass the two tests, the two checks. Okay. The thing that I wanted to show you was look at the IP address of the first server. Now is 18.212.181.249, and it used to be 54.189. I'm sorry, it used to be 54.89.228.0. It has completely changed. What happens is if you shut down a machine that has a public IP address attached to it, whenever you start it again, it's going to have a completely different IP address. Okay, and the same happened to the other one. The other one is the IP address of the other one is going to be 54.158.141.56. Now let's see if these machines are up and running right now. The state is they're running, so let me see if I can connect to the web servers that they host. So in this case, I'm going to remember the best thing I can do is select it from here and then go here to copy the IP address. To move this a little bit here. So this is the IP address, the public IP address. So what I need to do if I want to access the web server there is I need to going to extend this a little bit here. So now the new I need to connect to this one instead. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it here. And as you can see, the web server is there. And then in the second case, I get this IP address. And because the IP address changed, I have to use a different. Okay, I need to use this other different. If I enter here, it's going to do the same. So this is the thing that you have to notice about this behavior. Whenever you shut down an EC2 instance that has a public IP address attached to it, when you start that machine again, it's going to have a completely different IP address. Just before we saw that it works. I should be able to connect them. Now let's see what happens if instead of shutting down the machine, I simply reboot these machines. Let's see what happens to the IP addresses. We have the new IP addresses here. So let's see what happens if we reboot both machines. Is it going to change the IP addresses or are they going to remain the same? We're going to see that in a moment. So I'm going to refresh this. Let's see. Oh, I forgot to check the status checks before. I was only paying attention to the running state. The status check is what matters whenever you start an EC2 instance, by the way. I think that I successfully submitted the rebooting of the system. Let me see. So I'm going to do it again because when I click on the refresh, it just gives me the same. It seems okay. So I select the EC2 instances. If you notice, if I don't have anything selected, and if I click on change state, it doesn't know which machine to work with. So in this case, I'm going to select both, and I'm going to reboot them. You can see here that it says that it's going to reboot them. Confirm reboot. Yes. It says successfully rebooted. I think that it reboots them extremely fast. That's what is happening in this case. That's why we see them that they seem to be up and running. So let me go to the IP address of this, copy and put it here, for instance, and let's see if we get, oh, let me see, I need to copy this. Oh, this is the website. And then if I do with this, if I do the same thing with the other one, it connects to it. So the thing that we notice here, and I'm going to make an annotation here, is, so this is the annotation that I'm going to be making. If you reboot an EC2 instance, no, if you shut down, let's go. If you shut down, then start an EC2 instance with an attached public IP address. When that system boots up, when that EC2 boots up, it will have a different public IP address, okay? And the other situation that we just saw is if you reboot then if you reboot an EC2 instance with an attached public IP address, when the EC2 is back online, it will have the same IP address as it had before. Okay, so I'm going to different. Okay, that's important. So if you shut it down and then start it, it's going to change. If you reboot it, it will keep the same IP address, okay? That's the main thing about this lesson for today. Thank you. Oh, by the way, before anything, remember, because we're using the free tier of AWS, we need to make sure to, whenever you're done doing whatever you need to do, because if you don't shut this down, the the resources are going to continue to run, and you don't want to get a surprise bill from AWS. You need to terminate them. By doing this, they're going bye-bye. I'm going to get rid of both of them. Remove this out of the way. And rebooting them. Something interesting was, remember the last time that I connected to both servers, I used these IP addresses, which I have up here. If I try to go to these IP addresses, very likely, well, because the servers have been terminated, these, you can see it's trying to connect, it's trying to connect, it's trying to connect. It, the web page is no more. The web page is gone. If I had, I didn't test it when I shut it down, but if when I shut down one of these systems, the web page wasn't going to appear again. You see, it just gave up. And then with the other one, even though this is just something that's staying from before, but if I refresh the page, or if I click enter here, it will try to connect, try to connect, try to get in the new version of it. And what we're going to see is because we terminated the EC2 instance, but the same would have happened if I had used the shut down the machine instead of terminating them. The web server wouldn't be up and running. You can see it's telling me web page isn't working. Okay, so this is all I wanted to show to you regarding how to create an EC2 instance, explain to you something related to the region where you provision your where you launch your EC2 instances. Those EC2 instances are going to be launched in a specific availability zone. We saw that. We also saw how we configure the different with different specifications of that EC2 instance. Of the both EC2 instances, we were able to connect. We were able to create a script that was able to install the Apache web server. Well, first of all, update the Linux operating system. It was also able to install the Apache web server. It was able to get it started. It was able to enable it, so next time that I would reboot the system, the server would be up and running in the background. And also I created a very simple web page, but that's the main idea about that. And this is all for now, so thank you.